Ooh, oh my God, Thor's a woman. Wow. Well, this changes everything, doesn't it? I'm sorry, I just cannot figure out why I keep hearing about this. Who cares? Why should anyone care about this? Okay? You shouldn't. You can care a little. You can care a very little about this if you're following the comics, if you're invested in the story. You can kind of care, but this is nothing. This is not a thing. Okay? This does not need to be reported by major news outlets. When Superman died, that was kind of a thing, back when we were naive enough to think that he would stay dead. This is not a thing. Wait, two things. It's not Thor. This is another character entirely. Thor is not actually biologically transforming into a woman. It's just another character who happens to be a woman is getting his powers for a while. And number two, it's just for a while. A couple of years down the line, at most, the status quo is going to be reinforced. Thor will have his powers back and it'll be just like it was. This is nothing. This is a hiccup. This is a footnote in Marvel Comics canon, like basically all of their history is and has been for the past few years, because nothing ever changes. Doctor Strange lost his title as Sorcerer Supreme to a Jamaican superhero a little while ago. I'm pretty sure he got it back by now. This is... You want my opinion on the whole Thor is becoming a woman thing? I can't give you that because that's not what's happening. They've just got a new character. They're giving her Thor powers. Would anybody be making this big a deal if this was a man getting his powers, another man? No! And guess what? That's happened before. This is not the first time that someone else has gotten Thor's powers. In fact, there have been several times when women have gotten his powers. During a crossover event, Storm from the X-Men got... Was it Storm? Yeah, she got Thor's powers. Why didn't anyone raise a fuss then? Maybe they did. That was a while ago. I think Rogue might have gotten his powers once. Once Wonder Woman got his powers, briefly. How do you describe Lucy? There are many ways to describe Lucy as a film. Well, as a movie, anyway. You cannot describe Lucy as a character, because she is not a character. She's more an engine, or rather a walking plot device, designed to move from one place to another and make interesting things happen, even though she herself is not interesting. We don't even know anything about her before she becomes a superhuman. We're introduced to this young woman amidst various cutscenes and stock footage of things which are supposed to be tangentially related or serve as analogies to what's happening on screen. For instance, Lucy is being baited by her dubious boyfriend in Taiwan to go into a hotel and carry a suspicious briefcase to certain suspicious characters for him. And there's a shot of a mouse approaching a block of cheese on a mousetrap. This doesn't really apply since Lucy is not so much a mouse. She's not really interested in the trap at all. She keeps trying to get away from the guy. He only convinces her to go in when he attaches the briefcase to her arm with a pair of handcuffs. I found the whole stock footage routine fairly pretentious and pointless. When she goes into the hotel, these Taiwanese mobsters are intercut with scenes of cheetahs approaching a gazelle, and you see what I mean? And this goes on when they eventually capture her in the hotel. And of course, they own the hotel, I guess. They have to, because they get away with it. There's scenes of the cheetahs carrying away the gazelle, and these are pretty powerful Taiwanese mobsters. I don't know how corrupt Taiwan is, but according to this movie, it must be really corrupt, because her boyfriend is shot through the torso right outside the hotel. No one seems to notice. It's broad daylight. There's people outside. It's a public place. I guess these mobsters don't mind murders happening right in front of the building where they operate. In fact, their boss, the crime lord, whose name I forget or never heard, or I don't know, we'll just call him bad guy number one. When Lucy is carted into their hotel room, we see this guy butchering a bunch of his victims, just as crime lords do. I guess he's not worried about what he's going to do to take care of the bodies. I would think, if I was a crime lord, that I would want to kill my patsies in a private place where it would be easy to dispose of them, but I guess things work different in Taiwan, or outside of my imagination. And he comes out of the room, he's covered with blood, and he has a minion pour champagne over his hands, or some high-class alcoholic beverage. I wasn't very observant. If I was him, again, I'd just go to the bathroom and wash the stuff off with regular old soap and water, but I'm not a high-class Taiwanese crime lord. We never really get an idea what's going on. We don't know what the point is of this conspiracy with the briefcase. Even the gangsters don't initially know what's in the briefcase. We never really find out how Lucy's erstwhile boyfriend got the drugs which are in the briefcase. It's just kind of taken for granted that there's bad stuff going on of a criminal nature. They assume that it might be a bomb at first. Again, you'd think that if there was a possibility that this woman was carrying a bomb, they would want it to explode in some place other than the place where they do their business. But no, they just whip out these plastic shields, and the guy gets behind a wall while they wait for her to open the briefcase, just in case it explodes. But no, inside are these super drugs. They test one out on a junkie who they just happen to have in a closet, and then they shoot him. Do real mobsters operate this way? I mean, how much money do they have to bribe everyone to ignore that there are all these dead bodies moving out of their hotel rooms? I don't know how it works. I guess they have a system set up. Anyway, Lucy, you might have noticed I've done nothing to describe Lucy herself, because there is nothing to describe. All we know is that she's a person who is kind of roped into this thing. She seems like she's fairly headstrong. This wasn't her idea. And she's kind of scared about what's happening, like anyone would be. We don't get any idea of her life before this begins. Anyway, the mobsters decide to use her as a drug mule, along with some other people that they've captured or coerced. They're blackmailing all of them, and this will be an important plot point later, and by later I mean later in this review, not later in the movie. I don't know why they don't just pick people that they could trust, like maybe hire some guys, or maybe, you know, trusted members of their organization, instead of just picking people off the street and telling them that they'll kill all their loved ones if they don't do what they say. Why don't they just pay people to carry this out? They seem to have money to burn, but no, they get just random people who, I guess, Lucy just happened to be there at the time. They put these super drugs, these experimental super drugs, in their stomachs. That's what drug mules do. They transport drugs inside their bodies. Lucy is taken to a facility where other gangsters, lower class gangsters, rough her up a bit, and the pouch in her stomach breaks and these drugs get into her system. And for some reason, this doesn't seem to happen with the junkie who tried the drugs earlier, but for some reason, this causes Lucy to undergo a hyper-evolutionized state. She begins to float around the room like Fred Astaire tap dancing. I don't know why she hasn't started getting her superpowers yet. It's just she starts floating all over the room. She's attached to the wall by manacles. She's like a balloon unmoored. I'm tripping out. And then like that, she is. I can't always make good snappy noises. You know, when I first started snapping my fingers, I had to teach myself how I could snap with both fingers, but now I can't really snap with this hand so much as I can with this hand. This is my good snapping hand. Anyway, at that moment, Lucy ceases to be a human being. She blinks her eyes, and they change because of the magic blue stuff, the Smurf juice. Yeah, maybe this is that stuff that Gargamel was always trying to get from the Smurfs. That would explain a few things. A few. Anyway, she sits up on her chair, and she's basically become the Terminator. Or Data from Star Trek, only without all the charisma and curiosity and affability and personality. And that kind of bugs me about this movie. This movie, I'm only talking about this movie, really, because some months ago I saw the trailer and I poked fun at it in a, admittedly, probably somewhat lengthy and obnoxious YouTube comment, and someone yelled at me over it, and I guess I feel like I have to step up to the plate and face the challenge head on. But this movie, it has no character at its center. Lucy herself is a black hole. There's nothing about her that really resonates. She doesn't even really have a motivation per se. I would have preferred it if this evolution into this sober, emotionless character was gradual, because they do pay lip service at some points to her losing her connection to humanity, but she doesn't seem to have it. As soon as this stuff gets into her system, she's just a blank. We don't know what she likes or dislikes. There's no sign that she really dislikes anything, because I would have liked it if she had begun with a very human reaction. What if she acted like she was high? What if, wouldn't you? If you found out that you could float around and you could turn yourself into Keanu Reeves at will and take out these mobsters, that would be awesome. I'd go nuts with it. Like, oh my god, this is awesome. Look, I can see through time. I can control matter. I'm like an X-Man. I'm a superhero. Oh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Yeah. Hey, you mobsters, you want some of this? Well, come get some. Yeah. All right. Gonna do the Neo on you. Woohoo. I can see your soul. And for a while that's what she does, but she doesn't have fun with it at all. Because fun, apparently, is the first thing to go once we start using any more of our brain than we usually do. I guess fun is the least important part of our psyche. So it's just shed. She just craps out all the fun reflex in her body. So Lucy, of course, escapes from her captors by shooting them all with the guns which she ransacks from their underground hideout. She then escapes into the world, and here's this young woman who has found herself with the powers of a goddess. What does she do? To begin with, her awareness of the universe shrinks her awareness of social propriety down to non-existence. Lucy is a dick. Alright? She's practically a sociopath. I get they're pushing this whole disconnect with the rest of humanity thing, but right off the bat, she demonstrates a complete lack of thoughtfulness for human life. She has no qualms about killing these gangsters. She doesn't exhibit any reaction to it. Granted, she's been under extreme duress, but you would think that anyone killing people for the first time would engender some kind of emotional response. Again, I get that she's evolving beyond humanity, but there's no progression from this point to that point. She just is, all of a sudden, a robot. She goes out onto the streets. First thing she does, you might have seen this part in the trailers, she approaches a couple of cab drivers who are minding their own business. She points a gun at... She says, either of you speak English? One guy begins to say, no, I don't speak English. She shoots him. Why? Well, she's got a gun. I guess she's got to use it for something. To do otherwise would be illogical. She bullies the other cab driver into driving her to the hospital, and in case you're wondering, no, the first cab driver is not dead. She just shot him in the leg. We hear him moaning, my leg, from off screen, so I guess it's okay. Why does she need a gun to flag down a cab to take her to the hospital? Does she not have money? Is that it? Does she need is she short a few bucks? So she uses a gun to... It seems like the smartest person on earth could find some way around that. No, okay, I guess it's just ironic that the first thing that we resort to when we evolve beyond our current state is violence. I thought we were supposed to evolve beyond violence. Like, can't she find some way around that? But no, it's just a means to an end. Okay, she's very simplistic in her thinking that way. She waltzes right into the hospital, gun in hand, nobody notices, because I guess the smarter she gets, the dumber everyone around her gets. She walks into an operating room and shoots the patient that these surgeons are operating on, because she could tell at a glance that he wasn't going to make it, because she's got this hyper awareness. And at this point, she's only using 10% more of her brain than people usually use. See, this is a timer. It's a countdown. We are always apprised of exactly how much of her brain she's using at any given scene. We begin with 10%. Well, actually, we begin with 0% in one of those artsy-fartsy stock footage scenes. Well, not stock footage. They made new footage. It's all very 2001, and it's going to get more so. But we're always kept up with just how much of her has evolved. Now, with that, we may as well seg into talking about the elephant in the room. The elephant being, this whole movie is founded on crap. The whole thing about us only using 10% of our brains, that's a myth. It's like the moon being made of cheese or pop rocks making us explode. That's not true. Now, you can argue that maybe they're talking about neural capacity or something, but no, when you get right down to it, this is the same old thing. We use all of our brains, okay? Because otherwise, why would we evolve so much extra brain juice that we don't use? What is all this meat in our heads? Why do we have it if we're not going to use it? Usually, in science fiction films, or even in most films, arguably, you can get away with betraying the literal translation of physics and reality as we know it, so that some plot can form into some fantastical configuration. That's the nature of science fiction and fantasy. At some point, you have to step outside of what we know to be possible. But this, it's just, they build everything around just this. This is so integral to the motif of the film. It's all about how we only use 10% of our brains, and it's exactly 10%. It's not 9%. It's not 11%. It's 10% of our brains. That's it. That's exactly how much of our brains we apparently use. Dolphins, however, according to this film, use 20%. And so, presumably, were we to gain 20% of our brains, we would gain the powers of the dolphins. All through the first part of the movie, it's intercut with, amongst the stock footage and amongst the other scenes that they put in to try and make things seem more elevated, scenes of Morgan Freeman playing a wizened character, like pretty much every character he has ever been. He's a wizened soul, lecturing to a group of students or attendees on his theories of human evolution. As I was saying, Morgan Freeman plays a wise scientist who has formulated this theory, and this is another conceit which I enjoy seeing in sci-fi and fantasy motion pictures, how a scientist will be around at this point in history who just happens to have theories uniquely suited to tackling the dilemma of whatever's at hand. But it can be forgiven somewhat in Lucy, since he's just talking in very general terms. But he does go on about how it's just 10% of our brains that we use. And it's so weird to hear someone as wise sounding as Morgan Freeman talking about such gibberish. It's like, we know the moon is made of cheese, but if we could imagine that for a moment we could take off our space helmets and eat the moon cheese, what would we become? I have no idea. It's the same thing. But at any rate, we eventually move out of his lecture and into real time with him, because he'll be contacted by Lucy and he becomes kind of her sidekick and her disciple. Now, Lucy, who we left at the hospital, she's getting the bag removed by these scientists. She's holding them at gunpoint, of course, because that's just how she rolls. And she hijacks one of their phones and talks to her mother while they're operating on her. This is the evidence that I spoke of, that she's losing her connection with humanity, but she's aware of her loss of humanity, and it's all supposed to be very compelling, but it's not, because it's one of those deep phone conversations that the protagonist has with their mother that you see sometimes in movies like this, where they sort of say goodbye, and she's talking to her mother. She's, I can remember everything. Every memory I've ever remembered, I can remember it. I remember the cat that I stroked, the Persian, when we were but young. And her mother doesn't seem to react at all to the fact that her kid is clearly tripping balls. She's just like, oh, that's nice, honey. I hope you enjoy Taiwan. Call back soon, okay? But anyway, they take the stuff out of Lucy's body, and she's dying because this stuff is killing her, even though it's hyper-evolving her at the time. She gets in touch with Morgan Freeman, and she can do this through her laptop, because again, when you're smart enough in movies, you can get computers to do anything. She contacts Morgan Freeman through his TV set and through his radio, all at the same time, because she can do this. That's another thing that kind of bugs me about this movie. There's no solidity to this power tree which she is exploring. It's like in a video game. The higher her brain percentage gets, and I'm going to try not to harp on that, but it's so tempting because it's such a beautiful harp. But the higher her brain percentage, the more power she has access to. It's not really steady though. What power she gets, they don't evolve along any particular line of reasoning. She just has assorted superpowers, whatever the plot calls for. That's this movie. That's how it works. Whatever sequence it wants to happen, it will make happen. And why? Because, well, it's the old excuse. It's magic. We don't have to explain it. Well, it's the same way with Lucy. Anything she needs to happen, she gets the bag removed from her, and Morgan Freeman advises her that maybe she should just try to pass on her knowledge because she doesn't know what to do. Otherwise, she has no motivation, like I said. So all she can think to do is get to Morgan Freeman so she can pass on her knowledge. I don't know why she couldn't just post it to the internet or something. Seems like that would have been a quicker way to go about it, but no, she has to begin this pilgrimage to where Morgan Freeman is. And of course, she has to deal with the mafia first, the Taiwanese mob, the triad. First, though, she needs to gather more of the blue stuff so that she can continue her evolution. She breaks into the gangsters' stronghold, slaughters them all with her gun fu, and meanwhile, mob boss, the gangster number one, he's getting a tattoo. He doesn't hear any of the ruckus because he's got headphones on. I don't know why the tattoo artist working on him doesn't hear anything, because silencers do not make guns that much more quiet. Never mind. She marches in, she spares the life of the tattoo artist, and this is the scene you also might have seen in the trailers, where she whips out knives and plunges them into the gangster's hands, and she reads his mind, so that she can find out the location of the other drug mules after taunting him for a bit. This is the closest she gets to having fun. She just taunts him a little bit. A very little bit. And then she leaves. She does not kill this guy. Now, I don't advocate murder in any capacity, but if she's going to be a violent vigilante, slaughtering all these gangsters, I don't know why she wouldn't kill the guy in charge. That seems just kind of practical. If you're going to go that route, then you may as well go all the way. But no, she leaves him alive, and of course, his attempt to revenge himself on her will not overly inconvenience her, but hundreds of people are going to die because of this. I don't guess that she cares. I really don't know why she didn't just kill him. She had him at her mercy. Did she want him to suffer? Did she see that he would fulfill some role in the grand plan? No. Lucy doesn't give a crap about anyone else. Remember, I told you that she and the other drug mules were being blackmailed into cooperating because the gangsters claimed to have information on all their friends and families. Well, this is forgotten, okay? Lucy doesn't seem to care about putting her own friends and family in danger. The mob, I don't know, maybe they follow up on it, maybe they don't. We don't see, but there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't, because that would be a very logical thing to do if you were a mobster and one of your drug mules just marched into your stronghold and slaughtered a whole bunch of your guys. Why wouldn't you, go back to plan A, holding her people hostage, capture her mother, cut off a few fingers, tell her to knock it off? And what about the other drug mules? Well, Lucy contacts a French police officer, and she knows exactly what's going on around him, because she's just that omnipotent now, I guess. There's no structure to her evolution. Okay. She contacts this other police officer, and she arranges for each of the drug mules to be intercepted at their airports when they arrive. and maybe their families are now in danger, I don't know. But guess what? This gets the drug mules killed, and a bunch of police officers, because the police take the drug mules into protective custody. The Triad gets into where they are, another hospital, I think, and they slaughter all the police officers and the drug mules for the drugs. Lucy shows up after the fact. She doesn't save anyone. She's not the sort of super character who actually saves lives. She'll just beat up bad guys, and that's incidental to her main mission of getting her hands on the blue stuff. And I guess I should mention this scene where Lucy is on a plane working 2 computers at once, because that's supposed to be neat, and she begins to disintegrate because, I don't know, she needs more of the blue stuff. So she horks some stuff down in the plane bathroom, and her hair is black at this point. She changed it while she was in the airport, and no one noticed. Hair is sort of dead, though, isn't it? Shouldn't that be one of her more advanced powers? Never mind. I'm getting back into the minutiae, trying to put logic into this movie. She explodes in the airplane bathroom. That's not something you're supposed to do on an airplane, but she does it anyway. She explodes into little balls of light, and then the next scene, she's okay again in a hospital bed. She escapes. She contacts the French police officer. They get the drug mules. The Triad kills the drug mules and the police guarding her. She confronts the Triad and has one of those neat scenes where she just bats them aside with her Neo powers. The more of her brain is evolved, the more the universe becomes her droid, her iPhone. She just influences things with waves of her hands. And it's like that, too. It's one of those scenes that's so popular ever since Minority Report, where she just moves her fingers and manipulates reality. And she gets the other drugs, and she heads on down. And she leaves many of the gang members alive, and they, of course, contact the mob boss. And this sets up a confrontation in Paris. So we have Lucy in Paris now, with the French detective who she's kept with her because she says he's supposed to be a reminder of her humanity, I guess, because she kisses him. Okay. Her personality hasn't changed over the course of her journey, but I guess even goddesses gotta have a boy toy. She shoves him aside, and she begins driving, and now she's a perfect driver, and she's careening down one-way streets in Paris, running through sidewalks. People are diving, desperately trying to get away from her. The police officer seems remarkably nonchalant at all this. They're being chased by other police officers who, of course, assume that this one police car has gone amok. And the French police officer, I don't remember his name. I'm sorry. I should remember his name, but I don't. He didn't leave much of an impact on me either. But he's with Lucy while she's driving down the road, mowing down French civilians, and the guy says, "I should call those police officers, tell them to stop chasing us." Lucy says, "That's not necessary." And she causes traffic cones to rise up out of the street and causes a pileup. It's like the Blues Brothers. There's a pileup. These police cars are shredded. They're flying all over the place in the background. I guess no one was hurt, because Lucy knows what she's doing. She knows better than to let anyone get hurt, right? No, screw that. There must be dozens of fatalities, or at least serious injuries. Lucy's a dick. I know that she's evolving beyond humanity with her sacred percentages, but she's got to at least know better than this. Couldn't she just... Okay, but she makes it to the university, where Morgan Freeman in a white lab coat and a bunch of other white lab-coated scientists are waiting for her. And I love this bit. She calls him up on the phone, and Morgan Freeman's talking to her. "You're here? Can you be here soon?" And then she walks through the door. Just then. What was the point of that? I know this is a little thing, but why doesn't she just walk through the door? She calls him up a few seconds before she walks through the door. On the surface, it seems kind of amazing, like, oh, it's evidence, further evidence of her prescience. But no, she couldn't just walk through the door. She didn't need to call him up on the phone. So she sits down to have a talk with these scientists, and the French police officer organizes this resistance against a small army of Triad who are homing in on her location, and mob boss number 1 is there. If I was a mob boss, I would want to delegate this sort of thing instead of putting myself in the line of fire. But this is a very hands-on mob boss, I guess. You know, he's right there. They're unloading an arsenal of weaponry while whole line of French police officers are lining up in front of the university to fight them off. A small war occurs while Lucy is talking to the scientists and showing off with her powers, multiplying pins and mutating her hand into various shapes and projecting her thoughts like a PowerPoint presentation. And then she sits in a chair while they upload the rest of the blue crap into her veins. And the percentages keeps going up, 60%, 70%, 80%, and she melts herself off of the armrest to consume computer material around the lab and create a supercomputer. And while she's doing this, she somehow makes the room into Matrix space. It's all white and empty. It's magic. We don't have to explain it. And as she reaches 100%, she does a 2001. She swipes her hand across the world. Again, it's like the universe has become her iPhone, and she goes back in time, and she sees the first proto-human and touches its finger, 2001. So I guess she's sort of the instigator of all human evolution, or something. And she goes back past the beginning of time. She has a cosmic experience. Then boom, she's not there anymore. The mob boss breaks in. He shoots thin air, and this great big organic computer, which is formed in the middle of this white room, makes a flash drive for Morgan Freeman, which presumably contains all her knowledge, all her wisdom. Again, couldn't she just have put this on the internet or something? But the mob boss is killed by the French police officer, and he asks, "Where's Lucy?" He gets a message on his cell phone, "I am everywhere." And she says, "A billion years ago, our lives were begun," or something, and now you know what to do with it, because she has shown us the way. I don't care. I don't care. Usually when I go through a movie, I kind of care about the characters, but, well, Lucy didn't seem to care, so maybe we shouldn't either. And that's it. I'm not going to devote any more time to this. I've said all that I'm going to say. Is there anything else I should say? Let me see. I made a list of notes. Why didn't she kill the crime lord? She's insanely reckless. Police cruisers. Calls on the phone. Walks in a few seconds later. Hands-on crime lord. Exactly 10%. Not 9. Not the magic. We don't have to explain it. Turns into Keanu Reeves. Guess that's all I have to say. I've defended my honor. I saw Lucy. %10 of our brain, right. She couldn't have cured cancer or something?